My name is Robert Benson. I was a middle manager at an engineering firm that designed and built machines for clients. I knew I probably wouldn't advance further since it was a family firm, and I wasn't part of the family. Events led to my position in the company becoming unbearable. People tell me I'm one of the good guys, that I have a good sense of humor, or at least I did. I work hard, provide well for my family, and care about other people. I help when needed and take my responsibilities, as well as my marriage, seriously. Looks like I was the only one. Let me explain. I was slightly above average throughout high school. I was not a genius, but through hard work, I achieved good results in exams. I had a few fights when I was picked on too much, but once they were over, the hostility went away too. I have some very close male friends who have always supported me. I wasn't an Adonis, so women didn't rush to me, but the ones I met that seemed attractive to me found I treated them well. I was raised to treat others well, especially women. I took no for an answer, and never boasted about making love to them, or shared their secrets, which made me more popular. It's funny, but it was a few of these girls who helped me get through tough times when many other friends left me due to unfounded accusations. In fact, I discovered that some of them were never friends. I graduated from high school and began working at Ducker as a full-time college student studying engineering. I've always loved collecting things, first Duplo, then Lego, and now it's computer-assisted machine design. My friends say that I like my toys because I'm always interested in new gadgets. One of them I carried with me was an integrated camera that looked like a badge. It was meant to be a record of what I thought would be a great evening that I would want to remember later. When the scandal broke, I was glad I had it recorded as it turned out to be very useful later. But I'm getting ahead of myself. At the end of our first year of college, there was a big party where we celebrated being free for a couple of months. My friend Bill became very attached to a girl in the nursing program who also used some of the college and local hospital facilities. He persuaded me to come to the party to meet her friends, as if student nurses would pay attention to me, an engineer, and not to doctors. I am of normal height and appearance, muscular and fit thanks to my job. I went there because of the live music. Bill's friend Stephanie introduced us to the other girls. I was nice and complimented all of them, which was easy because they were all beautiful. I was surprised when one of them, Carol, started talking to me. We had a few drinks, danced. Her legs survived, as I'm not the most coordinated dancer, and she seemed to enjoy my company, even laughing at some of my awkward jokes. Carol was beautiful, about 5 feet 5 inches, with a slender build. She kept her hair no longer than shoulder length, as it was easier for her when working with patients. I was surprised when, at the end of the evening, she suggested we meet again. I agreed. I'm not a fool. Well, what happened showed me that I was a fool, but back then, we started dating, and soon I felt emotions that I had only experienced once before. I dated girls that I really liked, but Carol took my breath away every time I saw her. I missed her when we weren't together. My parents laughed at me, but not cruelly. They saw how happy she made me. I even started studying harder to show her that I could become someone in the future that she could respect, maybe even love. After the first time, our intimate life became very good, if not great. We often discussed our future. She wanted to become a registered nurse and felt she couldn't have children while doing that. I told her that I loved children and that having them wouldn't stop her career and might even help her, but that was unacceptable to her. I talked to my parents, who advised me to follow my heart. Mom loved Carol like the daughter she never had. My brother Dan already had one child and another on the way, so they had grandchildren. Carol was close to her sister Carrie, and when she finished her night shifts, she had 5 to 7 days off. She went to visit Carrie 2 or 3 times a year. It was 2 hours away. She said that I worked so hard that I wouldn't miss her. It wasn't true. I missed her. I gave in to her ultimatum about the family, and we got married almost 3 years after we met on June 16, 2009. Bill was my best man, and Stephanie was her chief bridesmaid. They were no longer a couple, as Stephanie wanted to marry a doctor. Bill liked to joke with her about the fact that she traded him for a doctor when they were dating. I agreed with him. Carol looked stunning as she walked down the aisle in an ivory satin dress, smiling at me the entire time. Our guests must have thought I was a fool because my smile never left my face. Carol finally moved into my house after the wedding. She had refused to do so before. I bought the house cheaply from my grandparents when I started earning enough for a mortgage. It needed a lot of work, but I had good hands. By the time of the wedding, I had mostly completed the necessary improvements, though there was still a lot that needed updating. There was another fight about our marriage, our bank accounts. Carol wanted to keep her own account, so she wouldn't have to depend on me to spend her money. I was supposed to keep mine, and we would open a joint account and invest money, depending on our earnings, to pay for utilities, vacations, and so on. I lost that argument too. The first few years were good, if not great. The nursing course had meetings, and I was able to attend most of them, though I missed a few because of business trips. To be honest, I felt like an extra wheel, tolerable, almost a joke. At first, Stephanie was always there since she was Carol's best friend. Carol tried to spend most of her time with me, but she also danced with a few doctors. I didn't see anything wrong with that. I became friends with several husbands because we shared an interest in golf. I managed to get my handicap down to 6 and was persuaded to compete with them. Other times, we went on golf weekends, some of them during meetings or when Carol was returning from night shifts. She still went to see her sister, which annoyed me. She tried to do everything before she left, so that I wouldn't miss her. Carol rarely spoke about her work or ambitions. She seemed happy to be an ordinary nurse. If I asked, she said she didn't want the responsibility and lack of interaction with patients if she got promoted. Carol and I planned our social life mainly around our friends. I still saw Bill and others, but it was mostly at the local pub for a few drinks. Carol sometimes came to parties and always seemed happy to be with us non-medical people if her shifts allowed. With her shifts, it was usually dinners, dances, and taxis as a couple. We spent time walking in the hills, going to Glasgow or Edinburgh for the weekend, and watching shows. We spent our holidays in places with beautiful beaches, but close to interesting sights. Carol's bikinis were rather conservative. I suggested more revealing ones, but she refused. She had never considered visiting a clothing-optional beach. We rarely quarreled. If one of us didn't want something or the other objected, we discussed it. Sometimes I won, sometimes she did. It never got in the way of our love. Nothing was taboo for experimentation. We liked some things, not so much others. Every day, I loved her more and more. Since our 10th anniversary was approaching, I wanted to do something special. I talked to Stephanie about booking a hotel, dinner, and dancing. She was all for it, and swore to keep it a secret. Other couples said the same thing. I knew I had to tell Carol, but closer to the event, otherwise, she would want to add more. When I told her a few days before the event, she was thrilled. I barely managed to get out of bed in the morning. She called Stephanie, and I soon found out that I would be the driver for the 4 of us that evening. Carol asked me to wait for her downstairs while she got dressed. I almost had a heart attack when she came down the stairs. She looked amazing. She had tried hard to impress me. She was stunningly beautiful. Her hair was styled, exposing her neck, which I loved to kiss. She was wearing a lilac satin dress that I had never seen before, revealing most of her amazing figure. The dress ended just below mid-thigh, and she wore stockings, which was unusual. I was fascinated. My mouth was open, and I was probably drooling. She was my fantastic woman, and more. My heart was pounding, and I almost stumbled over my words. Carol, you look amazing. I love you so much. I want to make love to you right now. Forget the hotel. Forget our friends. Let's party here. Carol laughed as she approached me. She smiled and said, "This is for you. You're the best husband anyone could wish for. I will tease you all night. I will dance only with you. When we get back to the room, I will rock your world like never before." I was so shocked. Her words showed that she thought about me the same way I thought about her. In the car on the way to Stephanie's, Carol played with my hand and smiled at me a lot. I was so happy, it was surprising that I didn't have an accident. She laughed at me. We picked up Stephanie and her husband, Brian. No wonder he was a doctor. He didn't look very happy during the trip. He and I played golf on a doubles team, and we were often in the top 10, winning several times over the years. I assumed he was having a bad day. As a trauma surgeon, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, as he said. I thought this was one of those days, and hoped that our evening would help him. How little I knew about what was about to happen. Now I suspect he already knew. Once at the hotel, we left our bags. Carol was very affectionate. She spoke quietly. "Later, I will make all your dreams come true. I love you so much." The conversation between the girls was very emotional. Stephanie was with Carol the entire time, and Carol was completely immersed in what Stephanie was planning. Both seemed very excited about the evening. Maybe Stephanie was planning to wear Brian out. He looked like he needed it. Brian and I were discussing an upcoming golf competition we were planning to participate in. Well, we had to defend the title. Mark and Grant played for fun, saying their jobs were stressful enough without competing. I think the real reason was that their wives, Sarah and Amy, were attractive, and they wanted time alone with them. Carol declined my invitation to return to our room with a grin, hinting that some of my fantasies might come true later. We went to the hotel nightclub and found a table near the back wall, close to the bar and main lounge, mostly away from the main speakers. We could talk, relax between dances, and enjoy the evening. Carol made sure everyone knew she was only dancing with me. We spent most of the next 90 minutes on the dance floor, stopping occasionally for a drink, water for me, wine for her. We were dancing when a man tapped me on the shoulder, and when I turned around, Carol had disappeared into his arms. I didn't even have time to react. I was shocked. She was so happy, and the look she was giving him was something I had never seen before. He was in control while they danced. I retreated to our table, stunned. Stephanie spoke up, and her delight was obvious. "Robert, it's so nice of you to let Carol dance with her first love. She invited him to your wedding, so he could take her, but he never came." I looked at her, and she smiled, but her gaze expressed complete contempt for me. There was something still unsaid. I was furious. I exploded. "What the hell is going on?" Others looked down. No one but Stephanie could look me in the eyes. I screamed. That ruined my evening. She only danced with me tonight. "You set me up, Stephanie. You told her to have time to arrange everything. You both knew about that man. What else did she have planned?" Others couldn't believe my rage. I was still glaring at Stephanie, waiting for an answer when Carol walked over and tugged at my arm. She had obviously heard me, and many around us had heard me and were looking in our direction. She had a serious expression on her face, and I knew I wouldn't like what she was about to say. She dragged me into the hotel lobby. To say my evening went from bad to disastrous would be putting it mildly. Carol spoke firmly. "Robert, the man I danced with is Bruce Benning. He is my first and only love." I choked, struggling for air. Carol continued. "We were dating before I met you. We dated several times a year. He was studying to be a pediatric neurosurgeon. You are such a good person, an honorable, decent man. I love my time with you. But I always loved Bruce. He's the reason I couldn't have your children. It would have hurt you when I left and took them with me. Bruce is now the head of neurosurgery at the hospital in Leeds. I will go with him. I am sorry that you are so badly hurt, but while we were together, I gave myself to you completely so that you would never know that I loved another. If Bruce hadn't come back for me, I would be happy to be your wife forever." I was breathing deeply. My vision blurred, my head buzzed, and my heart pounded. I was looking at someone I thought I loved. I vomited involuntarily, ruining the wonderful dinner from earlier. I saw Stephanie smiling while others watched. That man, Benning, was walking toward us. I looked at Carol and screamed, "You're an evil, lying, deceiving society girl. Give me your wedding and engagement rings, or I'll rip your finger off and take them." The others looked shocked at my outburst. It was so uncharacteristic of me, but so were the events unfolding in front of me. Benning came closer. I turned to him and said, "Stay away, or I'll make sure you never use your hands again." He stopped, surprised by my threat, and looked at the others as if seeking support. "You slept with my wife. You demand that she humiliate me, and these so-called friends are happy about it. All of you are dirty, low scum. How many of you cheat? How many marriages do you want to destroy for your pleasure? Women of easy virtue are more decent than any of you." I turned back to Carol, my anger crystal clear. I screamed, "Rings." My temporal arteries were visibly throbbing. I looked at her with fury I had never felt before. I wanted to wring her neck until it snapped. I saw the fear on her face when she realized the danger she was in. She took off the rings and cried, but I didn't care. I grabbed them and went to our room. I collected my things, gave the room key to the administrator, who had seen our exchange, and said, "This woman of easy virtue will pay for the room." Looking back, I'm ashamed that I didn't apologize for throwing up in their lobby. At least it wasn't on the carpet. It's unlikely that I will ever come back here again. I went home. My thoughts were everywhere. I don't even remember the trip itself. When I returned home, I became calmer. I don't know how I managed to calm down, but I knew I had to act. I went to the garage and turned off the automatic gate because she might have the remote control. I grabbed a box of trash bags and headed to our bedroom. I took her things out of the closets and put them in the bags. I pulled out the boxes and emptied their contents into bags. In one of the drawers at the bottom, I found 2 keys taped together, one for a safe deposit box and the other for a bank safe. I went through her jewelry box, took away all the jewelry I had given her, and threw the jewelry box into the bags. I went through our filing cabinet and took out all of her papers. I found her password book and copied it. There was nothing in the closet about her and Benning. It was almost 2 o'clock in the morning. My brain wouldn't calm down, and my heart was still pounding, although not as much as before. I checked online to see if I could figure out where the storage unit was, since there were 3 in town, all of which were available around the clock. I found the one I was looking for because they had a key picture on their homepage. I took latex gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints. What I found caused me pain in ways I could never have imagined. I thought I knew what pain was, but this tore my soul apart and shattered it into pieces many times over. I went back to the car and grabbed the camera I used for work to take pictures of everything inside. I documented everything. And I mean everything. There were boxes of files and 2 locked cabinets. I picked the locks, a useful skill for an engineer. I almost regretted doing it. In one of the cabinets were Carol's plans for me. I couldn't believe my eyes. Who the hell was she? The other cabinet contained Benning's files. His files confirmed my impression of him as a completely depraved, heartless man, a narcissist on steroids. The only person he loved was himself. I had to go back to the car to get the battery to charge my phone because the camera was dead. I made sure I photographed everything, finishing around 7 o'clock in the morning. I locked the cabinets so they wouldn't know I had been there. Then I went to a cafe and had breakfast, my mind reeling from what I had discovered. Carol's parents had insisted on a prenuptial agreement to protect their daughter, but from what I found, Carol was not planning to accept the terms of the prenuptial agreement and take her 10%. No doubt this was on Benning's instructions. She not only wanted to rob me completely, but also to destroy me forever. Although I wanted to confront her, I knew that I couldn't let her know that I was aware of her plans. The song asterisk, "The Curse of All Flyers asterisk," came to mind as I returned home. I returned the keys to their place so she wouldn't know that I had found them and knew their contents. Then I went to the hardware store and bought new locks for my house. Carol didn't have the keys in her clutch, but I wasn't going to take any chances. My next stop was the bank, where I checked out the strange safe deposit box I didn't know about. It contained bonds in her name only. I photographed them again. The further I dug, the more interesting it became. Where did she get the money for this? Who the hell is she? I had just returned home when I received a text from Carol saying she wanted to come by and pick up her car. I replied, "Your car? The car in question is rented in my name, and I am paying for it since your salary is so meager. I am going on vacation and will use it until the lease ends in 8 weeks. Your things are already in bags. I'll burn them if you don't take them. I'm going to buy straw to stuff your wedding dress and burn it, pretending it's you. The door locks and alarm code have been changed. Don't bring that man. He won't like it." A few minutes later, her sister called, screaming at me. I ended the call and blocked her number. I didn't actually intend to burn her wedding dress, but her reaction confirmed how important it was to her. The picture of her marrying Benning in that dress came into my head. I took it to the fire and set it on fire. It was beautiful, just like how I now thought about our marriage. Both were reduced to ashes. An hour later, Carol arrived with Stephanie and Brian. Brian said quietly, "Robert, how are you?" I laughed a bit, like Caesar after he was stabbed in the back by his friends. I glared at them all and screamed, "What the hell do you think? I'm furious, angry at you all for covering for her, not having the decency to tell me something you clearly knew. Basically, I'm angry at myself for believing this woman." Carol was unhappy when I called her a woman of easy virtue. She seemed to think that I should act normal around her. "Robert, I know you're suffering, but this is so unlike you. You ruined the nightwear I was going to wear for Bruce. That wasn't necessary. I'll get my things, and when I'm done, I'll leave you alone. I know I hurt you a lot, but I've always loved Bruce. You will be happier with someone who will love you and give you children. You are a very special person, and I really enjoyed our time together. If I had never met Bruce, I would have been so happy with you. May I pick up your wedding ring? It would be a beautiful reminder of how much we've done together." I just screamed, "No way. It's been passed down in my family from generation to generation. My mom loved how it fit you, like we were made for each other. I haven't told them yet what a devious society girl you are." Carol flinched at the force of my words. Brian and Stephanie helped her load the bags into their car. Carol asked about her wedding dress, and I told her to check the fire. She burst into tears when she saw the ashes. Stephanie called me an idiot, and I corrected her. "You covered for her all these years. She won't be able to wear it if she marries that man." These are the ashes of my marriage, my life. Brian, although shocked by my outburst, did not defend her. He was the only one who looked embarrassed last night. When Carol calmed down, she asked me to let her check to see if I had missed anything. I agreed. While she was doing this, I told Brian that we would not be defending any more titles. He nodded. Carol came down a few minutes later and said quietly, "Robert, I'm really sorry, but I've always loved Bruce. When you divorce me, you'll find someone who will love you the way you give love. You'll have the family you dreamed of. It hurts both of us. I really care about you, and I'm truly sorry that I hurt you, but it's for the best." They left, and I returned to the house. As expected, she needed the 2 hidden keys. I was so tired that I went to bed and fell asleep as soon as my head hit the pillow. I was woken up by a call from my mother. Before I could say a word, she began, "Robert, I never thought you would lay a hand on a woman, but Carol showed US photographs of her injuries. She explained why she left you." I was furious and could not restrain myself. "Mom, you've been deceived, just like I've been deceived for the last 13 years. She's been seeing that idiot all this time. She's setting me up to keep everything. I don't know who the hell she's become. Did I ever really know her? I've never laid a hand on a woman. You and Dad taught me that. Have you ever heard anyone say I laid a hand on a woman? Even last night when I wanted to break her neck so badly, I didn't. You can believe her or me, but keep in mind, the truth will come out. If you take her side, you will lose me forever." I ended the call. The front lines were drawn, and the war began. I went to dinner and returned home. I had the information, and now I needed to organize everything. As they say on television crime shows, follow the money. So I did. First, I closed our joint account. What I discovered was interesting, very interesting. I was glad I had copied Carol's password book, as it proved invaluable. I spent the evening and Sunday sorting everything out. I changed all my passwords along the way. I discovered that I had been cheated on, big time. Every time she visited her sister, or I went to competitions, or on vacation with so-called friends, she was with that man. I was furious, mostly at myself, for being such an idiot. Why didn't I see what was happening? Why didn't I see her visits for what they were? Why didn't I suspect even one affair? What is wrong with me? How could she do this to me? On Monday morning, I came to the office early. I wanted to check my annual leave and accrued hours. Sandra from HR was always there early. She saw that I wasn't in the mood. We met once and became very close. She ended it because she's a wonderful person, but was so scared of intimacy that she wanted me to find someone who could meet my needs. She's still single. Sandra asked, "Robert, what happened? I've never seen you so sad." I smiled an empty smile. My world collapsed. Friday was our anniversary. It was supposed to be a romantic evening. She arranged everything so that her lover would steal her from me in front of everyone. I found out that she was seeing him and was with him when she had 5 to 7 days off after night shifts. I wasted 13 years on a cheater who loved someone else. Now she says that I hurt her to accuse me of cheating. She wants to destroy me. Sandra was shocked. She came and hugged me. "Robert, I know you would never hurt a woman. Since we broke up, I despised myself for my weakness. You are such a decent, caring person. Regardless of what others think, I will always be on your side." I thanked her, and after talking for a while, we said our goodbyes. I felt slightly better, but it wasn't over. The next day, I started digging deeper into the finances. From the financial records, I saw that Carol had stayed at a hotel 3 hours away several times over the past 18 months. This happened while she was supposedly visiting her sister, probably runs in the family. I packed my suitcase and hit the road. The car was easy to drive, probably because Carol was so angry that I wouldn't give it to her, and I enjoyed it. I arrived at the hotel parking lot, doubting they'd give me what I was about to ask for, but it wasn't torture to try. I left my luggage in the room and returned to the reception. I asked to meet with the manager. The employee at the counter thought there was something wrong with my room, but I assured her that everything was perfect. I just had a request for the manager. The manager came out, and I explained what I needed, if possible. He was sure they couldn't help me without a court order. I expected this. I said that the man she was with pulled the same scam on a woman from this city that he plans to pull on me. The receptionist's ears perked up. When the manager left, she said quietly, "I know the couple you want in the video. They've been here many times. He's a disgusting man. I'm an old friend of the woman you mentioned. She's being relentlessly pursued by this man so that she'll sell everything and give him the money. I can call the lawyer who acted on her behalf. She's very good." I nodded. "Thank you. I'll be happy to help your friend." If she had just left with a prenuptial agreement, I might not have done anything, but they want to destroy my life. They picked the wrong person to deceive. 15 minutes later, I was sitting in an office talking to a lady named Heather Morrison, who was very assertive and didn't hesitate to speak up. When I explained my situation and what I had discovered, she said decisively, "Do you have this information at hand?" I nodded. "It's on my flash drive and camera. That's how I came across it. I have it more organized and structured on my laptop at the hotel." She looked pleased. "If you can be here tomorrow morning at 7:30, we can go through everything and head to court at 8:30. I think I can convince the sheriff to give us a warrant for the hotel tapes." I nodded, hopeful. From what I'd seen, he usually stayed at that chain of hotels. There were 3 other women he defrauded with the same scheme. I don't know how much Carol knows or how involved she is, but I'm going to fight her as best I can. I will need to find a lawyer in my city." Heather smiled. "I'll be your lawyer if you want. That man will be scared out of his mind when he sees me. He'll know he's in danger of something very bad." I laughed for the first time since Friday night. I believed her. I hadn't lost all faith in people as I thought. The next morning, I arrived at Heather's office. She introduced me to Jim, the father of a woman named Betsy who had been deceived by Benning. He was also the private investigator who would help track down the remaining pieces of the puzzle. Heather and I headed to court. After a series of meetings, we were granted the warrant. Soon, we had videos of the 2 of them at dinners and entering their rooms. We found another 26 reservations at various hotels in the chain, but no records older than 18 months. Heather commented, "Robert, we need to start divorce proceedings. If you file for divorce on the grounds of infidelity, they'll respond with spousal abuse charges using those photos. Let them submit first. They will have to provide their evidence, and we will break down their lies. The other women you mentioned could help us destroy this man for you." I nodded. I need a break. I don't know what to feel. I really want to break his arms so he can never do this again. I'll be gone for a few weeks, and then I'll have to find a job. If anyone wants to hire a husband who allegedly hurt his wife, even if the accusation is false, I'm not a football star. In fact, discovering that idiot's deception with those women helped me. I wasn't the only one deceived like this, but by finding proof, I'll help them as well as myself. I didn't feel so useless. I didn't feel much of anything other than sadness, fatigue, and intense rage every time I remember that evening. I stayed a few more nights and then drove south to Staffordshire for a roller coaster ride. They'd really relieved stress. Afterward, I headed north to explore the area around Inverness. I rode the North Coast 500 and moved to the northeast, where I rode the Grampian 250. I took part in the Glenlivet Smugglers Tour and enjoyed modern Glenlivet and a hut deep in the hills. Even though I've lived near both ranges, I had never been there before. The scenery was mesmerizing, allowing me to stop thinking about those men. I enjoyed my time, but a large part of me was still deeply wounded, and that feeling never left me. As my car rental was coming to an end, I headed home. When I arrived, I was surprised the lawn and garden were well maintained. I had expected them to turn into a savanna. My neighbor Gordon came out when he saw me. He smiled. "The man is back. How are you?" I laughed. "As good as I can be, I guess. Are you responsible for this?" He laughed. "One woman, Sandra, came in and stole you. She was worried about you. She told me a little about your problem." I was stunned. I never thought Carol was capable of such a thing. She should have become an actress. Along with Sandra, several other women, and I kept your garden in order. I'm not sure everything survived, though. Some official people have been coming by the last few days. Don't be surprised if they knock on your door." I thanked him. I needed to go get some groceries. When I get back, come over for a beer or two. A few weeks after leaving, I called Sandra. We've talked several times a week since then, but she never mentioned it. She made me talk about my feelings and listened quietly when I cried. I need to do something to thank her. Gordon and I were chatting on the terrace when the doorbell rang. I opened it, and the courier handed me the divorce papers, grinning. I smiled and told him, "I hope the judge hates liars in his court." I called Heather, who asked me to scan the documents and email them to her. She will handle all legal responses. She sounded very pleased, but didn't explain why. When I asked, she said, "The less you know, the less you may inadvertently say to others." 7 weeks later, I was waiting for Heather outside the courthouse for her divorce hearing. Jim was with her. He was very happy and just hugged me when we entered the court. I sat next to Heather, and behind me were Sandra, Josie, Michaela, Gordon, Bill, and a few other friends who were supporting me. My brother Dan called me several times and encouraged me. He couldn't come because of work. He had a conflict with our parents because they believed Carol and not me. I wasn't surprised to see her medical colleagues, Stephanie and Amy, supporting her. Benning was there next to Carol, grinning like an absolute fool. He lost his cool when Heather and Jim entered. I think Jim had a plan for him if this court didn't deal with him. My parents were also there for her. I ignored their looks and didn't look at Carol when she looked at me. Bill described her as a powerfully dressed woman of questionable virtue. His comment was not quiet. I can imagine the look she and Stephanie gave him. Carol's lawyer, Ms. Johnston, began the process. She looked very confident. My client wants to annul a prenuptial agreement that would have limited her to just 10% of the value of their joint assets. Although she admits to committing adultery, this was only after she had endured physical abuse at the hands of Robert Benson for almost their entire life together. She wants a divorce based on spousal abuse and a division of property in her favor. These documents show the assets of the marriage at the time of their separation. She gave a copy to Heather, and the court clerk handed it to the judge. Heather couldn't help but laugh, and the judge seemed surprised that they had to exchange documents. Heather stood up. My lord, due to Carol Benson's actions, there was no opportunity for mediation until today. I'm sure you'll understand why when the evidence is presented. Ms. Johnston and I have spoken little about the evidence that will be presented. She wants, with the consent of the court, to present all the evidence against Mr. Benson before I re-examine the witnesses. I agree to this, provided that I have a judicial oath allowing me to re-examine these witnesses afterward. Without this, I will interrogate them as they appear. The judge pondered for several minutes. This is highly unusual. I can understand Ms. Johnston's desire to fully illuminate your client's actions. I will agree and allow you to cross-examine the witnesses after Ms. Johnston's examination has concluded. Heather continued her opening statement. Carol Benson planned her deceptions with the intention of bankrupting a decent, caring man. We are demanding alimony from Carol Benson since my client lost his job because of her lies. This lie cost him many friends and relationships, including with his parents, with whom he was very close. There has never been any spousal abuse, and we will prove it. Heather sat down, smiling. She was going for the kill. Carol took the witness stand. I felt her gaze on me, but I looked straight ahead, never looking at her. Her attorney walked her through meeting me, our early years of marriage, and when I supposedly began to become violent. Carol explained, with tears in her eyes. Robert didn't like the fact that I worked nights. I'm sure he thought I was sleeping with doctors every night. His anger grew, and he started punching me in the face. I used makeup to hide it at work. I went to my sister's to let the bruises heal before returning to day shifts. He was fine until the next night cycle, and it all started again. My sister kept trying to convince me to leave him. She took pictures of some of the beatings, saying I would need them for a divorce. Her lawyer asked, "Did you cheat?" Carol, who could win Best Actress at the Oscars every year, sobbed. I'm embarrassed to admit it, but yes. I knew Bruce before I met Robert. I ran into him one day by chance near my sister's house. He saw the bruises and was so kind and supportive. I started to have deep feelings for him. We made love several times. He made me feel whole, not like some broken woman who could be hurt. The lawyer walked her through her meetings with Benning before our anniversary dinner and its aftermath. She wanted her engagement ring back. I had supposedly threatened to rip her finger off if she didn't give it up, and to break Bruce's fragile hands. My anger terrified her, as she was afraid I would act on it due to my previous cruelty. I took all the jewelry I had given her, but she only wanted the engagement ring. Carol indignantly described finding her nightwear set in the bin, floating in urine, when she returned to get her things. She burst into tears as she described finding her beautiful wedding dress burned to ashes. Her lawyer sat down with a triumphant grin on his face. The next witness was her sister, Carrie, followed by Stephanie and then Benning. All gave convincing testimony about my inappropriate behavior, although none of them witnessed it, only the consequences. Carrie confirmed that she took the photos, which made Heather happy. By the end of Benning's testimony, it was too late, and the judge adjourned the hearing until the next day. As I was leaving the court, Sandra came up to me and said loudly, "I have never heard such disgusting lies." She hugged me, as did the others. My parents just looked at me with disapproval. They had made their choice. The next day, Heather asked Carol to return to the witness stand. Heather was completely focused, and her every phrase was like an arrow. "Miss Reese," Heather began, using Carol's maiden name, "you claim that after another beating from your beloved husband, you met Bruce Benning, whom you briefly knew from working at your hospital. He was so supportive that he charmed you, and you became infatuated with him. Is this story true?" Carol blushed. "Yes." Heather pressed a button, and the conversation we had earlier that evening was heard in the courtroom. "You were the best husband anyone could ask for. I will tease you all evening. I will dance only with you. When we get back to the room, I will blow up your ship like never before." Heather smiled. "Are those the words of a battered wife?" Carol replied, "I tried to show that I cared, but his violence forced me. I hate him." Heather continued, "For your 10th anniversary, you dressed up for your lover, but professed your love for your husband. You told him how much you loved him. You did everything a loving wife would do in a loving relationship, right?" Carol stammered, "I was trying to please him." Heather pressed, "A consummate actress playing the part of a loving wife, knowing you're going to stab him in the back. A nightwear set to tease him, but it wasn't for him, was it?" Carol said quietly, wearily, "Yes." Heather was adamant. "You and your longtime lover decided to humiliate Mr. Benson, whose only mistake was that he loved a cheater." Heather pressed another button, and the courtroom heard my conversation with Carol after she left me. "Robert, the man I danced with, is Bruce Benning. He is my first and only love." My sigh was clearly audible as she continued, "He and I were dating before I met you. We met several times a year. He was training to be a pediatric neurosurgeon, so we couldn't be together. He was happy when I found you. You are such a good person, an honest, decent man. I enjoyed my time with you, but I always loved Bruce. He is the reason I couldn't have your children. It would have hurt you so much when I left and took them with me. Bruce is now the head of neurosurgery at a hospital in Leeds. I'm leaving with him. I'm sorry you're in so much pain, but while we were together, I gave myself to you completely so that you would never know that I loved someone else. If Bruce hadn't come back for me, I would have been happy to be your wife forever." Heather ended the video with the sound of my gag reflex, the perfect response to her lies. The courtroom gasped in shock. Carol looked scared, but quickly recovered. I tried to soften the blow for him by not making it about violence. I lied to him so he wouldn't lose face. Heather pressed another button, and a video of Carol standing outside our house appeared on the screen. "You ruined the nightwear set I was going to wear for Bruce." Carol was shocked. Heather snapped, "Did you say it was for your husband?" Heather smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. "You lie so easily. You've honed your skills so expertly over the years. Every time you had night shifts, you claimed that he beat you out of jealousy and that you left for your sisters to recover. Is this true?" Carol looked at her like she was seeing horns. "Yes." Heather simply smiled. "Luckily, your husband keeps excellent records. We have those dates. So, you were with your sister in Kivington from May 9th to 14th, 2019, December 26th to 31st, 2018, August 16th to 22nd, 2018, and from March 9th to March 14th, 2018, and on many other dates since the beginning of your marriage." Carol responded sharply, "Yes." Heather pressed another button, and videos of Carol and Bruce in hotels on these dates appeared on the screens. For dates that did not have the video, booking forms and payment receipts were provided to clearly confirm their attendance. Heather addressed the judge. "This material was obtained under a bench warrant issued at Hamilton Sheriff Court. I have attached it to the documents and records that I provide to your clerk and Ms. Johnston." Heather turned to Carol, who turned white. It's remarkable, isn't it, that there is not a single sign of bruises, almost as if they never existed. It seems that you, Miss Reese, and Mr. Benning loved these hotels, and were there every time you claimed that you were going to see your sister. He didn't save you. You were his mistress. Carol was angry with Heather. I tried not to smile. I could hear laughter behind me. Heather became even more determined, continuing to press Carol. Now let's look at these financial fantasies that you presented to the court. According to your agreement with Mr. Benson, you both had to contribute a proportionate share of your salaries to a joint account. You wanted to preserve your financial independence, but that's not the whole truth, is it? You wanted to hide your income from Mr. Benson so that you would have a secret fund in case you decided to leave him. He was just a tool for your use. You lied for years that you were his wife. You lied for years that you were a simple nurse with almost a minimum wage. The truth is that you are, as he describes, a mistress for Benning. You have advanced significantly in your profession and earned almost 4 times more than you stated to Mr. Benson. You did not increase your contributions to the joint account in accordance with your agreement. In fact, you pretended to be poor when you wanted a new car, and Mr. Benson paid for the lease while you used it for your secret affairs with Mr. Benning. You had no moral problem paying for some of your affairs out of the joint account. Heather pressed another button, and Carol's bank statements appeared on the screen. They showed significant savings, and the checking account showed significant income from her work that she never disclosed to me. Poor nurse who didn't want a promotion when, in fact, you are the 3rd most senior nurse in the hospital. Heather cited the bonds as evidence. How do you explain how these bonds ended up in your name and were found in your safe? Carol looked around in shock. I could see her reflection on the monitor screen. I tried to remain completely indifferent, never looking at her directly. Carol recovered. I took care of myself after his beatings. Heather continued. These accounts belong to Miss Reese and reflect the current certified bond amounts. She handed the document to the court clerk and Ms. Johnston, who was no longer smiling. Heather smiled benevolently. I knew she was ready for the final blow. You want your wedding ring back. It's a family heirloom, and an adulteress wouldn't expect to keep it, would she? Is it for sentimental reasons? To remember a worthy man, a loving person, not someone who abandoned you after fulfilling his needs. Carol stood insistently. I love this ring. It meant everything to me, especially after he burned my wedding dress. I want it back. Heather pressed another button, and a photo of Mr. Bruce Benning and his fiancée, Carol Reese, at a hospital reception 9 months before our breakup appeared on the screen. The wedding ring was clearly visible. Heather continued. The newspaper summary of the evening was excellent. Mr. Benning proudly showed off the incredible one-of-a-kind engagement ring he gave his future wife. She repeated the words in a harsher tone. He gave it. It looks remarkably similar to the ring Mr. Benson mistakenly gave to the woman pretending to be his fiancée, doesn't it? It was a comedy to convince hospital administrators that they were getting a dedicated chief neurosurgeon. The article states that the hospital administrators said they preferred their surgeons to be married because it connected them with the local community. So it's not about sentimentality or even love, but about the position you so desire, the doctor's wife. You need this ring to complete the deception of the hospital administration. Heather concluded by asking, you and your lover planned the ruin of the man who loved you, provided for you, and took care of everything you wanted. Your lover promised you marriage despite being a serial cheater. I wonder if this position, which you so long for, will remain available after the end of this trial, and how long it will last. Carol was shocked that Heather was hinting at ruining her future. Ms. Johnston asked no more questions. She looked shocked and defeated. The judge was clearly ready to dismiss the case, but Heather wasn't done yet. She called Carol's sister, Carrie, to the stand. Carrie walked slowly into the witness box. Heather was precise. Will you admit that you lied to this court by covering up your sister's affair with Bruce Benning? Her sister started crying. Yes. Heather asked, Did you take photographs of the alleged injuries? Carrie answered quietly. Heather finished. I will report to your church leadership how unchristian you have acted. Carrie's eyes widened in fear. To hell with you, lying. Heather called Stephanie next. Stephanie stood straight but tense. Heather began quietly. How long have you known about this connection? Stephanie replied. The connection was with Robert. Carol always belonged to Bruce. Heather smiled. Why did you lie for her? Stephanie stood her ground. I never lied. I repeated what I was told. Heather continued. Did you ever see those bruises she claimed? Stephanie replied. No, she was so upset that I believed her. Stephanie refused to budge on her claim that she was an unwitting victim standing by her friend, despite multiple questions. Heather was flawless. There was no room for Stephanie to hide from her false statements. Later, Heather finally asked, Do you know how to tell the truth? How many boyfriends have you had? Are you planning to pull the same trick on your husband when someone better comes along? Stephanie was shocked. I love my husband. I would never do that. Heather pressed a button, and a video appeared on the screen showing Stephanie leaving the room with Amy's husband, Grant, and meeting up with Carol and Bruce. Stephanie sat down on the bench before collapsing. Amy screamed from the gallery, You're damned, and ran out of the hall. I'm guessing it won't be long before Brian and Grant find out what happened. Heather asked the judge, May I ask permission to call one more witness before cross-examining Bruce Benning? The testimony of this witness will make everything clear to the court. The judge agreed. I later learned from Bill that Benning seemed to have a heart attack when Heather said the name Samantha Weissman. A woman I had never seen before took the witness stand. She was the perfect advertisement for makeup. She looked flawless. Heather smiled. Miss Weissman, what is your job? Samantha replied, I'm a set designer and work in theater, film, and television. I can create textural effects or use makeup to create the experience of most events. Think of street artists using chalk to create huge potholes in the road or trains coming out of walls. I can make you look like that. Heather continued, Do you know Bruce Benning? Samantha answered carefully, Yes. I met him when I was living in Bristol. My son, Alan, was diagnosed with a benign brain tumor, and Mr. Benning operated on him. The operation was a success. That was 8 years ago. Heather asked, How did Mr. Benning know about your skills? Samantha answered clearly. After the operation, Alan's motor skills were impaired for a while. I was helping him regain use of his arm and hand. We were playing with Play-Doh, sculpting his favorite monsters, when Mr. Bruce Benning came in. We talked, and he seemed interested. Heather asked, Did this lead to something more? Samantha replied, Yes. It was close to Halloween, and he asked if I could do his makeup for the party. He wanted to be the battered spouse, since his friends always said he was too stressed out, like he'd never heard the joke. His reputation, he said, was undeserved as a man who would not tolerate rejection from a woman, let alone her dominating him. This was to show them that they were wrong. I did his makeup for 3 parties that year, each a slightly different shade as the bruises matured. Since then, I've done it for 3 other events a few years apart. Heather asked, Besides Mr. Benning, do you know anyone else in this courtroom? Samantha looked around the room and replied, Carol and Stephanie. I did their makeup for some parties in Liverpool last year. They said their husbands never laid a hand on them, but they wanted to see how their friends would react. Heather pressed another button, and images of Carol and Stephanie appeared. These photos were likely copies of Samantha's work as they showed the entire process. Both had no visible marks before starting. When Samantha finished, I would have believed that Carol had been beaten. She's phenomenally good at it. I almost jumped with delight when I realized that the photos of Carol were the same ones she had shown in court. Heather concluded, So all these photos show your work and not a single actual physical injury. Samantha said, They were immaculate when they arrived. They looked beat up when they left. Heather asked simply, Did you know what your creations were really intended for? to discredit and frame their husbands for assault, and for Benning to sue women who rejected his advances. Samantha was shocked. "No, I would never do that. If I had known, I would have contacted them and offered to tell the truth." Heather said, "Thank you." Miss Johnston had no questions and looked shocked and defeated. The sheriff was clearly ready to close the case, but Heather wasn't done yet. She called Bruce Benning to the stand. As Benning took the witness stand, two men entered the courtroom. They only looked at him. Benning didn't look too pleased. "I didn't take my eyes off him. I wanted to watch Heather rip him to shreds." My cruel smile showed how much I was looking forward to this. Heather began, "Mr. Benning, you had an adulterous affair with Miss Reese before she married Mr. Benson, didn't you?" Benning's arrogance showed as he replied, "No, I just came to her aid." Heather walked him through all his lies, and his arrogance made me shudder. He loved to talk about his achievements at every opportunity. As Heather tightened the noose around his neck, she opened the hatch. Heather smiled. "You stated yesterday that you only recently became intimate with Miss Reese after her husband beat her. However, today I showed the court a 10-year history of your meetings in hotels, meetings that lasted several days." She laughed at his attempts to engage with her love. Benning was furious. "No, we only recently became close." Heather continued, "Many of these hotels have received complaints about noise coming from your room while you were having a night. Are your hotel neighbors lying?" Benning stared at Heather as she presented numerous complaints. Heather smiled as she continued, "Even more complaints were made about your behavior with women at their pools. You were careful not to let others see it, but the hotels kept records of complaints." Heather showed these notes and began to close the case. "You are lying to hide your relationship with a married woman. You are lying to your employers. You are claiming that all these records are a fabrication. Are you really a surgeon, or is this another hoax?" Benning was angry. "I'm a surgeon, one of the best." Heather laughed. "You may be a talented surgeon, but you are disgusting as a person." Heather pressed a button and began showing photos that depicted Benning as the victim of a beating. She paused so people could read the accompanying letters showing how he defrauded 4 courts, obtaining significant financial settlements from women like Betsy, whom he defrauded. Court records showed they all denied attacking him. His own records showed that he formulated his plans in retaliation for the refusal of his advances. These photographs were the key element by which he convinced the sheriffs, despite all other evidence, that the women had not attacked him. Heather took it apart in detail. He could not answer some key statements. She took off his mask, exposing his violence against women. "Your colleagues were right about you. You cannot accept a woman as an equal capable of refusing your pathetic advances. Those who did this and had property, you persecuted. You lied in court. You are a small person in every sense of the word." His angry response did not go unnoticed by the sheriff. Heather almost laughed when he called her a damn witch. His arrogance disappeared as he began to understand what awaited him. After tearing him to pieces because of the women, Heather moved on to the main course. She showed recordings of meetings between Carol and Benning, their correspondence and letters. Benning denied that they had been communicating for as long as Heather claimed. When she displayed the detailed plan to charge me with beating Carol, the courtroom gasped. Benning's plan was detailed, showing how they intended to ruin me and destroy my life. Benning tried to dismiss it, claiming these were just the fantasies of lovers distracting from reality, that they would never actually do this. Heather explained, "That's exactly what you've already done. You deceived his parents, his employer, and you deceived Miss Johnston into presenting this to this very court." She continued with more documents and turned to Benning. "You weren't going to stop there, were you? You already had another deception on the horizon, didn't you?" Benning denied it but looked increasingly worried as he glanced at the 2 men and Carol. Heather paused, as if about to serve dessert. There was a loud sigh. It was Carol, whose dreams were now crushed. Her reputation would never be restored. I smiled, very pleased. On screen was Benning's plan to marry Carol to strengthen his position as chief neurosurgeon. In 3 to 4 years, he planned to master new techniques that would allow him to move to the United States and earn millions. Carol was supposed to be discarded when he grew tired of her. He intended to ensure she committed adultery to claim all her property. He had 3 scenarios for her adultery. One involved blindfolded bondage, marked with an asterisk. One involved illegal substances, and the last was her big man fantasy. Carol's sobs were clearly heard. Her dream was shattered, and her reputation was ruined. I smiled, very pleased. Heather told the court, "He has lied in his court, and others to get financial compensation. I believe the courts will be merciless with him. Sheriff Griffiths of Hamilton has issued a warrant for his arrest. These officers are here to execute him on behalf of his victims. I obtained a court order to freeze all his assets, which was executed this morning. I am confident that Ms. Reese now understands the difference between what she gave away so easily and a fraudster who seeks to deceive gullible women to compensate for his many shortcomings." The officers led Benning away in handcuffs. Heather then called me to the witness stand. She spoke in detail about the words of love from Carol, which I'm sure were meant to make a point, a nightwear set to tease me for the future. I admitted that I had urinated on it after throwing it in the trash. I explained my devastated state and shock at what had happened. This was made worse by the fact that they had told others I was supposedly an abuser. I had lost my parents, my job, and many friends because of their lies. I was still unemployed because no one wanted to hire someone accused of abusing his wife, even if the accusations were false. I had lost everything dear to me. The sheriff said he would make his decision the next day regarding the division of the property and concluded, "Mr. Benson, you have been completely exonerated and have avoided a grave miscarriage of justice. You are truly a decent, honest, and caring person. Just as your lawyer said at the beginning, you deserve to find someone who will build a good future with you." He concluded sternly, "Tomorrow, I will deal with those who lied in my court." Jim hugged Heather, and then he hugged me. Bill, Sandra, and the others hugged me as well. I saw my mother crying. She had lost her daughter and son, with what Dan said. Her visits to her grandchildren had decreased noticeably. The next day, the sheriff dissolved the marriage and awarded me a share in accordance with the law. Carol looked devastated. I doubt even Samantha could hide the fact that she spent a lot of time crying. The sheriff made it clear that he was seriously considering jail time for lying in court. If Carol had won, and the truth had come out later, she would have received several years in prison. He fined her £5,000 and gave her a suspended sentence of 3 months. In addition, he ruled that she must pay my legal fees in full within 1 month. Otherwise, the suspended sentence would be replaced with actual imprisonment. Carrie and Stephanie were fined £1,000 each, which they had to pay within 30 days. Benning was due to appear in Hamilton court, and Sheriff Griffiths explained his thoughts to him later over coffee. Heather, Jim, and I discussed plans for the future. Heather was going to involve the General Medical Council and try to remove Benning from the medical register. While we were talking, Jim received a call from Hamilton court. Benning had been taken into custody. Sheriff Griffiths made it clear to Benning's defense that at the next hearing, he wanted to see all the money he stole from those women paid into court. Otherwise, Benning would face a lengthy prison sentence. In addition, he could expect to be required to pay in full for all legal fees and any other justifiable expenses these women incurred as a result of his false claims. Even with these payments, he faced a significant prison term. Heather also planned to appeal to the General Nursing Council regarding Carol's behavior, which was despicable for someone in such a senior nursing position. She knew she probably wouldn't be successful since it wasn't related to Carol's professional work, unlike Benning's situation, but it would make employers think twice about hiring her. I was looking for a job because I didn't want anything to do with Carol anymore. Heather advised me to accept child support until I found a job. I was shocked when Jim quietly said, "Take some time with Sandra. For some reason, you seem to like her. Every time I talk to her, she seems sweet and caring. Maybe you can help each other since she said she can't be what you want, whatever that means. I'll only say this once, after what you've been through. See a counselor. Despite your cheerful attitude, you have a lot of pain. You're not fooling us. A counselor can help you find yourself, live life, and find happiness. You deserve it. Heather and I have seen a lot over the years, but your story is worthy of books and movies. You are truly a good, honest, and worthy person. Get some therapy to get yourself back. Apply yourself and build a good life. As we said our goodbyes, Heather's last words made me laugh. If you think the sheriff went easy on her by not putting her in jail, he didn't. My bill would be about $24,000. Your rate would be much lower since you helped Betsy a lot, but she won't know about it. Dan stopped by after work and was very happy for me. I looked tired because the newborn hadn't allowed me to sleep. They decided to have a third child because Dan wanted a son, and now they have it. Our parents haven't seen him yet. He offered me a job on the night shift, but I refused because I didn't have much experience in that area. He hugged me and said, "You will find someone who will be faithful to you. You will have the family you dream of, at least before your first toxic diaper." He laughed as he walked away. Sandra, Josie, Michaela, Gordon, Bill, and others came later to celebrate with me. It was so much fun. Josie surprised me by asking me to dance. She smiled, pulling me closer. Give Sandra a chance. She's always felt connected to you. You'll be good for each other. If not, Michaela or I will hook you up. She laughed, pretending to limp as if I had stepped on her foot. Sandra was the last one left. "Robert," she said, "I would help you if you needed anything. I still mean it. I wish I could have been the woman you needed back then. I still have never been with a man. I wanted to make love to you so much, but I was so scared. My mother always told me such terrible stories about intimacy that I couldn't decide. I still can't get over these thoughts. Michaela, Josie, and the others are open to being good friends with you or more. You are too good a person to be alone. I saw you interacting with other employees' children at work. You will be a great father. Do what you need to find that love." She kissed me tenderly and was about to leave. I gently held her hand. "Sandra, I think we can help each other. Back then, I was too young and insecure about myself and women to help you. I cared about you very deeply. You were my first love. Jim said I need to see a counselor to find myself. Maybe we could both see a counselor and see what happens. You have a fear of intimacy, and I have an emptiness. I don't know who I am." Sandra smiled. "Robert, if we do this, it will be because I want to be with you as a partner and perhaps a mother in the future. You deserve it." I hugged her and kissed her. She paused and said, "Let's try the counseling." 2 weeks later, the local newspaper featured my photo on the front page. The article explained in detail how they tried to frame me. No one doubted that I was a victim. There was no support for Carol in the comments section of the online version. Some of the comments about what should be done with her scared me. About 8 weeks later, I received a letter from Heather with copies of her letters to the General Medical Council, the General Nursing Council, and the leadership of the Cry Evangelical Church. Heather did not miss the opportunity to condemn Benning and pointed out how his actions damaged the reputation of the medical profession. She detailed his public revelations and lies in court and asked for his license to be suspended immediately. It helped that, at his third court appearance, despite having paid back over $250,000 he had defrauded from these women, Sheriff Griffiths sentenced him to 5 years in prison. Heather provided photos of Samantha Weissman's makeup process and her court testimony, which were submitted to the prosecutor. The defense received copies of this evidence before the end of the first day of the hearing. Benning admitted his guilt at the first opportunity, so he should have received a 33% reduction in his sentence. Sheriff Griffiths referred to previous court decisions upheld by the Court of Appeal and mentioned that, despite the 5-year limit, he could have imposed a 7-year sentence on Benning had the case gone to the High Court. He considered taking the case to the High Court as it might result in a harsher penalty, which he felt was likely. However, given the delays caused by COVID-19, he decided that this course of action would be most appropriate. In other words, challenging this decision would be risky. Because Benning was a senior medical consultant, the case became a major story, and some national newspapers picked it up. He was harshly criticized in the Sunday editions. I was asked to comment but declined, saying I was still too stunned by the betrayal to make any statement. Heather's letter to the evangelical church leadership questioned Carol's suitability for her position and future promotions. She pointed out that Carol lied under oath while holding the Bible, showing that she was covering up multiple violations of a commandment that requires congregation members to obey. Carol's position in the evangelical church hierarchy would become problematic. I doubted that her marriage would survive with her husband's zeal for piety. I found out at the golf club that Brian and Stephanie had separated, as had Amy and Grant. Sarah and Mark faced difficulties as he began to become seriously suspicious of her due to her closeness to the other three. As for Carol, I didn't care at all. She put me through hell, and then was deceived by a knight in rusty armor. Karma is a cruel thing. As for Sandra and me, we had been seeing 2 counselors for over 3 months now. It was difficult, but we helped each other. At least she helped me, and Sharon helped Sandra. I accompanied her, but usually stayed only for sessions related to the causes of her fears. She often cried when she recounted these stories, and I hugged her tenderly. Sharon was excellent at capturing the key phrases Sandra's mother used and explaining their impact. She began giving Sandra positive affirmations and discussed how she really felt when she was with me. If the conversation turned to night relations, I usually left the room. I began to participate in these discussions when it came to fantasies. Sharon wanted Sandra to hear my thoughts as a man so she would understand that while some fantasies might be arousing, they don't have to be realized. It's important to set boundaries to protect each other. Sandra could blush. I mean really blush. I was seeing a psychologist named Sarah. Sandra held me while I cried as we discussed my feelings about Carol and our marriage. I was completely lost. Sarah slowly and carefully helped me dismantle the wall I had built to control my feelings. I hated her for it. When I experienced that pain again, it revealed my feelings of loss and my hunger to understand what I had done wrong. She helped me realize that the worst thing was not the betrayal, but how ready Carol was to destroy me, which truly shattered my world. I didn't know this Carol. I no longer recognized her. I no longer recognized myself. Sarah said I hadn't done anything wrong. I turned my anger inward because I couldn't find answers. If I wrote it down and saw it in black and white, like an engineering problem, I would understand that it was the 2 insidious people who were at fault. It's not my fault. I didn't play any role in their plans. I was the good guy everyone talked about. Sandra supported Sharon in this and insisted that I write down my story. She was very persistent, overcoming all my excuses. Finally, she said that if I did this, she would reward me. I have read what was written several times and can see that I am not to blame. None of my friends had any reason to suspect what Carol was doing. For all of us, it was an ideal marriage. We rarely quarreled. I may have been gullible in thinking that she loved me, but there was nothing I could do to prevent them from executing their plans. Truth be told, I will have to work on accepting it. I know I ruined their plans and lives even more than they ruined mine. I called Sandra and told her I was done. She said she would be here soon. I didn't know what the reward would be. She's a great baker and teased me about her scones. I love buns. We spent a lot of time together, hugging in the movie theater or at home. Our physical contact was limited. The negotiations we had were brilliant. We had so many common interests, and some of them I didn't see the point in. But I was glad she did. For example, she doesn't see the point in golf. A good walk ruined was her feeling. Sandra spoke to Sharon a few weeks ago about her love for children, and now hopes to be able to have them in the future. Sharon seemed to have helped her, as our last session showed. So perhaps there is a future together. There was a knock on the door. I opened it and found Sandra there. She was very nervous. She came in and I offered to take her coat. She looked at me with the strangest expression I had ever seen on her face. She curled her lip as she did in stressful situations and looked scared. She sighed heavily, shrugged, and slowly took off her coat, revealing that she was topless underneath. I was amazed. We made love. Robert, I could never treat you like that. You are the best man I have ever met. I was so scared tonight, but I wanted to do this for us. You were everything I expected and more. The most pleasure I've ever had. Thank you for being you. 2 weeks passed, and everything changed again. I was in a very happy mood. I had a job with a competitor, JR, who paid me more than my previous employer. Niall Davidson seemed like a great guy when he interviewed me, and he confirmed everything I had heard about him. He had his own problems, so he sympathized with what I was going through, but that didn't stop him from scrutinizing my engineering skills. Sandra and I spent most of our evenings together.